What happened to the legendary ships that set sail and never returned? From the Flor de la Mar, overflowing with treasure, to ghostly vessels like the Mary Celeste, drifting without a crew, history is filled with maritime mysteries that defy explanation. Each lost ship hides a story of wealth tragedy and unanswered questions. Tonight, let's journey across oceans of time to uncover the most mysterious vanished ships in history. Imagine this, a ship gliding silently across the vast Atlantic, its sails torn by the wind, its cargo safe in the hold, the captain's cabin neatly arranged, yet not a single human soul on board. No cries for help, no signs of struggle, no trace of where the crew had gone. On December 4th, 1872, the American merchant vessel Mary Celeste was discovered in this eerie state, drifting aimlessly as if abandoned by time itself. Everything was intact: food, water, cargo, even personal belongings, except for the most important thing, the people. This chilling emptiness would forever mark Mary Celeste as the most legendary ghost ship in history, a riddle that the ocean still refuses to give up. If you were an explorer who happened to discover the Mary Celeste adrift at sea, what do you think truly caused the entire crew to vanish without a trace? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The ship Mary Celeste had a rather complicated history before embarking on its fateful voyage in 1872. Launched in Canada in 1861 under its original name Amazon, the vessel went through several owners and a number of mishaps, from collisions to changes in registration, before eventually falling into the hands of American investors and being renamed Mary Celeste. By late 1872, Captain Benjamin Briggs, a man highly regarded for his caution, extensive experience, and strict discipline, was entrusted with transporting more than 700 barrels of industrial alcohol from New York to Genoa, Italy. It was an important commercial mission, and Briggs chose to bring along his wife Sarah and their young daughter Sophia, in addition to 7 carefully selected crew members, all strong and seasoned sailors. On November 7, 1872, the Mary Celeste departed New York Harbor under favorable weather conditions. The ship was fully provisioned with food and fresh water for at least 6 months, and its valuable cargo was securely fastened in the hold. Everything pointed to a smooth voyage, with no sign of the looming tragedy. Yet only a few weeks later, when the Mary Celeste was discovered adrift in the Atlantic Ocean, the vessel was found completely deserted, marking the beginning of one of the most haunting mysteries in maritime history, a story that still sends shivers down the spine of the world today. On December 4th, 1872, the brigantine DEI Gratia, commanded by Captain David Morehouse, spotted the Mary Celeste drifting about 600 miles off the Azores. The sight stunned the crew of the DEI Gratia. The sails were tattered, the compass broken, and about a meter of water had seeped into the hold, but the vessel was still seaworthy and perfectly capable of continuing its journey. The strangest detail of all, not a single person was on deck. When they boarded her, they found provisions and drinking water untouched. The crew's personal belongings were neatly arranged: clothes folded in drawers and beds made with blankets still in place. Even a meal seemed to have been recently prepared. There were no signs of struggle, no bloodstains, and no evidence of violence. The cargo of alcohol was virtually untouched, though one lifeboat was missing. Captain Briggs's logbook revealed that the last entry was made on November 25th, just days before the discovery. After that, complete silence, and it was this detail that instilled such dread: a seaworthy ship with everything intact, yet the entire crew gone, as if they had evaporated from the face of the earth. the most haunting aspect of the entire Mary Celeste story lies in the absolute absence of human life. The ship remained intact, the cargo still in place, the crew's personal belongings neatly arranged, and provisions and fresh water sufficient for months. Yet everyone who had once set foot on board had vanished without a trace. If it had been a storm, there would have been wreckage. If pirates, there would have been evidence of plunder. If a mutiny, there would surely be signs of violence. Instead, the Mary Celeste revealed a chilling paradox. Everything remained in order, except for the people. The image of a solitary vessel drifting across the open sea, sails, torn rudder, still functional cargo, untouched, but with no footsteps and no voices to answer, evokes humanity's most primal fear: disappearance without a trace. An empty silence that sent shivers through the entire maritime world. Since the discovery of the Mary Celeste, countless theories have been put forward to explain the mysterious disappearance of her crew. One of the most popular theories concerns the very cargo on board, more than 700 barrels of highly volatile industrial alcohol. Some suggest that a small explosion or sudden flare-up of fumes may have occurred in the hold, prompting Captain Briggs, fearing a catastrophic blast, to order an emergency evacuation onto the lifeboat. However, if the boat was swept away by strong currents or met with an accident, the crew would never have returned, leaving the ship eerily deserted. Another theory points to the raw power of nature. Massive rogue waves, waterspouts, or sudden ocean currents could have swept the lifeboat and crew away in an instant. Others have speculated about human causes, mutiny, internal conflict, or even murder, followed by abandonment of the ship. Yet, when investigators boarded the Mary Celeste, they found no signs of violence, theft, or struggle, making such explanations less convincing. And finally, there are the supernatural accounts. Some claim that the Mary Celeste fell victim to sea monsters, alien abduction, or even a mythical Bermuda Triangle. Though lacking evidence, these tales are precisely what transformed the Mary Celeste from an ordinary maritime incident into one of the most haunting legends of the sea. The Mary Celeste was taken to Gibraltar for investigation. Despite numerous interrogations and inquiries, no definitive explanation was ever reached. The ship continued in service for years afterward, but never shed its cursed reputation as a ghost ship. Over the next century, the Mary Celeste inspired countless books, newspaper reports, and films. It became more than a maritime case. It became a cultural icon, a reminder of humanity's helplessness before the vast and unpredictable sea, and a symbol of the invisible fears that lurk beyond the horizon. Today, whenever people speak of ghost ships, the name Mary Celeste is always the first to be mentioned. Of all the mysteries that drift across the oceans, none is as tangible, chilling, or baffling as this one. The Mary Celeste remains a haunting reminder of life's fragility at sea. It shows that the ocean is not only vast and dangerous, but also filled with mysteries beyond human comprehension. To this day, no one knows for certain what happened during that fateful voyage. But one undeniable fact endures: the Mary Celeste was found completely deserted, with not a single soul on board, and it is this emptiness that has immortalized it as the most enduring legend in maritime history. Imagine sailing across the vast blue waters of Australia's Great Barrier Reef and suddenly spotting a sleek modern yacht drifting with no one at the helm. That was Kaz 2 in April 2007, a vessel that looked perfectly alive yet eerily abandoned. Its engine still hummed. The GPS glowed with coordinates, the radio whispered static, a laptop sat open on the table, and even lunch was left unfinished on plates. Everything spoke of normal life, except for one chilling detail: The crew of 3 had completely vanished. No cries for help, no signs of struggle, just a ghost ship carrying silence across the waves. If you stumbled upon a yacht like the CAS 2 engine running lunch still on the table, but not a single person on board, what would you think happened to the crew? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. This was not just a thrilling story in modern maritime history, but a mystery without a satisfactory explanation, immediately reminding many of the famous Mary Celeste case in 1872 in the Atlantic Ocean. However, the crucial difference is that CAS 2 occurred in the 21st century in the context of satellite navigation, radio communication, and advanced maritime safety systems. Yet all of this still could not answer the haunting question, where did the 3 men go? The 3 sailors aboard CAS the Singed were Derek Batten, 56, along with brothers Peter Tunstead, 69, and James Tunstead, 63. They set sail from Airlie Beach, Queensland, heading toward Townsville, on what seemed to be a simple journey of friendship and enjoyment of the sea. None of them were professional mariners who had crossed vast oceans, but all 3 had years of experience sailing along Australia's coastal waters, confident enough to handle CAS 2 safely. For them, this trip was a blend of passion, relaxation, and pride in mastering a modern yacht. Yet within only a few days, that joy turned into a baffling tragedy. When the vessel was eventually found, it remained intact from helm to cabin, everything in its place, with no trace of chaos or accident. Only one chilling truth left everyone in shock. The men had vanished completely, leaving CAS 2 drifting silently as though forgotten in the endless sea. What the Coast Guard found on board resembled a house whose occupants had just stepped away for a moment. The engine was still humming, the electronics still powered. On the table, a meal was left unfinished, forks and knives resting on plates. Windows were open, letting the sea breeze drift inside. A camera preserved the last recorded footage, showing the 3 men standing on deck, chatting casually, with no sign of tension or danger. And then, everything stopped there. After that moment, no one ever saw them again. What made CAS 2 a true enigma was the complete absence of any signs of violence or serious accident. A torn sail was the only hint that the vessel might have encountered strong wind or a technical issue, but this was not enough to explain why 3 men disappeared simultaneously. Life jackets were still in place, the life raft had not been deployed, the radio sent no distress call, and the logbook recorded nothing unusual. In the long history of maritime mysteries, few cases show all safety equipment left untouched like this one. Right after CAS 2 was discovered, many theories were put forward to explain the mysterious disappearance of the 3 sailors. The most common theory suggested that while adjusting the sail or anchor, one man accidentally slipped and fell overboard. Instinctively, the other 2 rushed to rescue him, and in that chaotic moment, all 3 were swept away by the sea, leaving the yacht to drift on its own. This has been considered the most reasonable scenario, consistent with the remaining evidence on board, such as the torn sail and the placement of certain objects. Yet the theory still leaves many puzzling gaps. Why did no one manage to grab a life jacket when they were still neatly in place? Why was no distress call sent through the radio, even though the equipment was functioning? And most importantly, how could such a seemingly minor mishap result in the simultaneous disappearance of all 3 men, leaving no trace of resistance or survival efforts, as if the ocean had swallowed them whole in an instant? In the early days of the investigation, some speculated that CAS 2 might have fallen victim to pirates, since that seemed like the most straightforward explanation for an abandoned vessel. However, this theory was quickly dismissed. All valuables on board, from cash and electronic equipment to personal belongings, remained untouched, with no signs of rummaging or theft. Moreover, the waters off Queensland, where CAS-2 was discovered, are not known as a hotspot for piracy or maritime crime. The intact presence of everything on the yacht strongly indicated that the crew were not victims of an outside attack, but had vanished due to some other mysterious cause. The strangest part was the ship's absolute silence. At sea, when an emergency occurs, the natural reaction of any crew is to send out distress signals. Yet on CAS-2, no call for help was ever made. It seemed everything happened too fast, too unexpectedly, leaving the men no time to respond. This chilling impression only deepened the mystery. 3 men vanished in an instant, leaving the vessel functioning normally, as if the ship itself did not realize its masters had left it. The press at the time dubbed it the modern Mary Celeste. Indeed, the similarities were striking: a ship in perfect condition, belongings undisturbed, no blood, no signs of violence, only the people were missing. But unlike the 19th century Mary Celeste, CAS-2 existed in the age of advanced technology where data could be tracked and preserved. Yet even with this, no answers emerged. The most haunting element of the CAS-2 case was the absolute absence of people. Across the vast ocean, physical traces remained, but life itself had evaporated. No bodies were ever recovered, even after extensive search operations. Families, friends, and the maritime community struggled to accept that 3 sailors had simply disappeared into nothingness. For them, this was worse than death, for at least death leaves behind evidence. CAS-2 became a stark reminder of human fragility before the sea. No matter how advanced technology becomes, people can still be swallowed by the ocean in an instant. And it was precisely this silence, the ship continuing to function without human hands, that turned it into an unsettling symbol of modern maritime mysteries. To this day, more than a decade later, the mystery of CAS-2 remains unresolved. The theories are still only speculation, with no conclusive proof. The only certainty is a bizarre, final moment. 3 men chatting casually on deck, then suddenly gone. Their ship continued its soulless journey, a mute witness to a secret never revealed. CAS-2 reminds us that even in the 21st century, with satellites orbiting the globe and instant communication technology, the ocean still keeps some secrets for itself. And perhaps the disappearance of the 3 sailors in 2007 will forever remain a question mark hanging over maritime history. Imagine a ship so massive it towered over most vessels of its time, 165 meters long, carrying more than 11,000 tons of cargo, and crewed by over 300 men. This was USS Cyclops, the pride of the US Navy's logistics fleet during World War I. Yet in March 1918, as it sailed through the waters now infamous as the Bermuda Triangle, the Cyclops and everyone on board simply vanished. No distress call, no wreckage, no bodies, just silence. To this day, the disappearance of the USS Cyclops remains one of the greatest maritime mysteries ever recorded, an unsolved riddle that has haunted historians, sailors, and mystery hunters for more than a century. Do you believe the USS Cyclops was lost to a storm sabotage or something far more mysterious within the Bermuda Triangle drop? Your thoughts in the comments below. USS Cyclops was launched in 1910 as the lead ship of the Navy's massive Collier class. Measuring more than 165 meters long, over 20 meters wide, and capable of carrying up to 11,000 tons of coal or manganese ore, it was considered a source of pride in the US logistics fleet. Unlike battleships with their heavy guns or destroyers with their speed, Cyclops played a quieter but essential role, supplying fuel to other warships, becoming the lifeblood that sustained the fleet's power during World War I. The Cyclops carried more than 300 crew members, including naval officers and civilian sailors. With its colossal size, it was not just an engineering achievement, but a floating fortress, symbolizing America's rapidly expanding logistical strength in the early 20th century. The final voyage of the USS Cyclops in March 1918 is regarded as one of the most mysterious tragedies in the history of the US Navy. At that time, the massive vessel was tasked with transporting an enormous load of manganese ore, an essential material for steel production during wartime, from Brazil back to the United States. It was meant to be a routine journey, but it took place under extraordinary circumstances. World War I was at its peak. The Atlantic Ocean was not only a vital trade route, but also a hidden battlefield where German U-boats lurked, stalking every American merchant and naval ship. Beyond the dangers of enemy attack, ships also faced unpredictable weather and the technical limitations of their own design. On February 16, 1918, the Cyclops departed Rio de Janeiro fully loaded. Burdened with this massive cargo, the ship was heavier and slower than usual. Along the way, it made a few short stops to take on supplies, and on March 3rd, the Cyclops docked at Barbados. This would be the last time the ship was ever seen or officially recorded. After leaving Barbados, the ship set course directly for Baltimore, Maryland, but then it completely vanished. No distress signal was ever sent, and not a single clue, no oil slick, no wreckage, no drifting bodies was ever discovered. For a vessel 165 meters long, with more than 300 crew members, such a total disappearance stunned the public and seemed beyond belief. What makes the case even more perplexing is that weather reports recorded no major storms along the ship's expected route. The ship's logs left no hint of technical failure or panic among the crew. The Cyclops appeared to have simply disappeared from the maritime map in an instant. This strange vanishing has since tied the ship's story to the legend of the Bermuda Triangle, the infamous stretch of ocean said to have swallowed countless ships and planes. In the months following the disappearance, the US Navy mounted a large-scale search along Cyclops's estimated route, but no wreckage of any kind was found. A massive ship laden with heavy cargo and more than 300 lives all vanished as if they had never existed. In its final official report, the US Navy admitted it could not determine a cause. It could only state the ship disappeared without a trace. No one knows what happened. This remains the largest non-combat loss of life in US Navy history, and to this day, it has no definitive explanation. For more than a century, the strange disappearance of the USS Cyclops has driven researchers, journalists, and enthusiasts of the unexplained to propose countless theories in an effort to understand what happened in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. One of the most common ideas is that the ship was struck by a violent storm during its journey from Barbados to Baltimore. With its enormous size, heavy cargo, and structural instability, Cyclops may have been overwhelmed by massive waves and sunk so quickly that there was no time to send a distress call. However, weather records from that period do not confirm the presence of any major storm, leaving this explanation without solid evidence. Some experts instead point to technical issues. The Cyclops was rumored to have shown signs of hull warping and structural weakness. When carrying a full load of manganese ore, the immense weight could have caused the ship to break apart in mid-ocean, sinking instantly and giving the crew no chance to respond. Others believe the cargo itself might have been the culprit under certain conditions, Manganese ore can trigger strong chemical reactions, even explosions. A blast in the cargo hold could have destroyed the vessel in an instant, explaining why no distress signal was ever received. Beyond this, the broader context of World War I cannot be ignored. In 1918, the seas were rife with the dangers of German U-boats, leading to speculation that Cyclops was either attacked or sabotaged. Yet no evidence has ever surfaced, and Germany never claimed responsibility. Finally, the theory that has captivated the public most of all is tied to the legend of the Bermuda Triangle. Many believe that this stretch of ocean hides strange geomagnetic phenomena, mysterious whirlpools, or even supernatural forces beyond the reach of science. For many, it is this so-called curse that swallowed the USS Cyclops and 309 souls, erasing them forever without a trace. What makes Cyclops even more legendary is that its two sister ships, USS Proteus and USS Nereus, also vanished in similar circumstances in the Atlantic during the 1940s. This fueled the belief that a curse surrounded the Collier-class vessels. In popular culture, Cyclops is frequently mentioned in books, documentaries, and investigations into the Bermuda Triangle. It has become one of the most famous examples of the mystery of that region, where science and imagination have yet to provide a definitive answer. More than a century has passed since the disappearance of USS Cyclops. Modern seafloor mapping technology has solved many maritime mysteries, but Cyclops' wreck has never been located. Its final voyage in 1918 was not just a historical tragedy, but also a stark reminder of the vast unknowns that still lurk within our oceans. Cyclops departed Barbados on what seemed like an ordinary day. Yet within just a few short days, it and 309 souls vanished from the world, leaving questions that remain unanswered. Perhaps that is why the mystery of USS Cyclops endures as an immortal legend in maritime history, a giant ghost ship of the Bermuda Triangle. In 1845, under the command of Sir John Franklin, the ships HMS Erebus and HMS Terror set out on one of the greatest missions of the age of exploration to conquer the Northwest Passage, the frozen sea route connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. The British Empire at that time was eager to find a new route to expand trade, and Franklin was entrusted with a formidable expedition of 129 men equipped with the most advanced technology of the 19th century. Both ships carried steam engines, heating systems, reinforced hulls to withstand the ice, and enough canned provisions for 3 years. In theory, this expedition was nearly perfect, hailed as the Iron Army of science and imperial ambition. Yet the journey became one of the most tragic and mysterious maritime disasters in human history. Only a few years after departing, no messages were ever received. Both ships disappeared completely, leaving grieving families and a nation haunted by the question, what truly happened in the frozen Arctic? What do you think truly caused the mysterious deaths of the entire crews of HMS Erebus and HMS Terror? Lead poisoning from canned food disease, the brutal Arctic climate, or perhaps another mystery still unsolved? Share your thoughts in the comments below. According to the few surviving records, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror became trapped in thick ice near King William Island in 1846. At first, the crew remained resilient, relying on their stored provisions and modern technology to endure. But the brutal cold, the lack of sunlight, and prolonged psychological pressure soon pushed them into a spiral of hunger, illness, and despair. By June 1847, Sir John Franklin, the spiritual leader of the expedition, had died, leaving more than 120 men adrift in uncertainty. A brief note later found in a metal canister on the island stated that the ships had been abandoned, and the survivors were forced to march southward, clinging to the faint hope of finding safety. Tragically, those were also the last words the world would ever hear from them. From then on, the darkest chapter began. All 129 sailors vanished with not a single soul surviving to return. Clues to their fate came only from later search parties, from Inuit testimony, and from skeletal remains scattered across the frozen landscape, silent witnesses to a tragedy that has never found its final answer. One of the greatest questions surrounding the tragedy of HMS Erebus and HMS Terror is the true cause of the crew's deaths. Scientists have spent decades studying and debating the issue, and the most striking evidence comes from what was once the pride of 19th century British technology: canned food. The tins were sealed with lead, a preservation method considered advanced at the time, but as the solder corroded, lead slowly seeped into the food, silently poisoning the sailors. Forensic analysis of their bones revealed abnormally high levels of lead, enough to cause neurological damage, digestive disorders, weakened immunity, and overall physical collapse. Yet lead poisoning was only part of the story. Scurvy caused by vitamin C deficiency ravaged their bodies as well: swollen bleeding gums, loose teeth, unhealed wounds, and a steadily deteriorating morale. Combined with the brutal Arctic cold, the lack of fresh food, and the endless darkness, their health deteriorated rapidly. Many succumbed only months after abandoning the ships, while the final survivors faced a merciless choice to keep staggering forward in hopelessness or surrender and lie forever in the eternal frozen wasteland. One of the most chilling and haunting pieces of evidence about the fate of the crew comes from the accounts of the Inuit, who reported finding human remains with unusual marks, suggesting that the English sailors were forced into cannibalism during their final days. Later excavations confirmed this detail. Many bones bore clear, sharp cuts made by metal blades, indicating that flesh had been deliberately removed. These were not the traces of an accident or wild animal activity, but proof that the sailors, driven to the brink, had to break every moral boundary just to cling to life. The image of Royal Navy men, once regarded as symbols of honor, discipline, and imperial power, reduced to desperate figures surviving on the bodies of their comrades, made this tragedy all the more painful. It reflects both the unforgiving cruelty of the Arctic and the helplessness of humans when pushed to the absolute limits of survival. What made the tragedy of HMS Erebus and HMS Terror even more haunting was their complete disappearance, lasting nearly 170 years without leaving any clear trace. During that time, countless search expeditions were launched and numerous theories proposed. Some believed the ships had been crushed by the ice. Others thought they had drifted further south, yet all remained mere speculation. That absolute silence turned the disaster into a collective obsession for the British. Newspapers, novels, poetry, and even folklore drew inspiration from the tale. It was not only a maritime catastrophe, but also a symbol both proud and bitter of imperial ambition against the unyielding power of nature. In 2014 and 2016, after nearly 2 centuries of searching, Canadian archaeologists finally discovered the wrecks of HMS Erebus and HMS Terror beneath the Arctic seabed. Astonishingly, both ships were preserved almost intact thanks to the harsh cold and perpetual ice. Inside, many compartments still retained their original structure, along with countless artifacts such as personal belongings, books, nautical instruments, and even the everyday items once used by the crew. These discoveries were not only a breakthrough in underwater archaeology, but also opened new hope of uncovering clues about the expedition's tragic final days. Yet even as the evidence becomes clearer, the central question remains unanswered: what truly killed all 129 sailors, leaving not a single one to return? Today, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror are not merely wrecks lying silent beneath the ice. They stand as symbols of courage and the fragility of humankind before nature. The mysterious deaths of their crew evoke both sorrow and fascination. They remind us that no matter how well-prepared or technologically advanced humans remain small against the vast power of nature. At the same time, this disaster remains a costly lesson for science navigation and human ambition. HMS Erebus and HMS Terror may have perished, but the story of their doomed 1845 voyage still echoes through time. It is not just the tale of two vanished ships, but a painful reminder that the greatest mysteries are not always what we have yet to discover, but the brutal truths we may never want to face. On the morning of January 31st, 1921, the treacherous waters of Cape Hatteras, ominously nicknamed the Graveyard of the Atlantic, revealed a chilling spectacle. A towering five-masted schooner, the Carroll A. Deering, loomed silently on the Diamond Shoals. Its sails were tattered by the wind, its hull scarred by the surf. Yet the most horrifying detail was not the ship's wreck itself, but the unnerving emptiness within. No voices, no footsteps, no trace of its crew. Only a colossal vessel standing mute like a ghost, frozen in time on the edge of the sea. If you were among the first to board the Carroll A. Deering that day, finding an enormous ship completely intact but eerily deserted, what would you think had happened to the crew? Share your theories in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Launched in 1919, the Carroll A. Deering was among the most modern commercial sailing ships of its era, boasting 5 towering masts and a design optimized to carry massive loads of cargo. Its mission seemed straightforward: depart from Norfolk, Virginia, deliver coal to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and return to the United States. The outbound journey was recorded as largely successful, but on the way back, strange signs began to surface. Lighthouse keepers reported odd behavior among the crew, at times unruly or confused, and most intriguingly, a mysterious man was seen on deck in place of the actual captain. At first, these fragments appeared harmless, yet when the ship was later discovered completely abandoned, they became chilling clues, suggesting that what seemed to be a routine voyage had long carried within it the ominous shadow of an unsolved mystery. When authorities finally boarded the Carroll A. Deering after it had run aground on the Diamond Shoals, they were confronted with an unforgettable and chilling sight. The rudder was severely damaged, the steering wheel appeared deliberately destroyed, and the compass ship's log and all navigational instruments had vanished without a trace. Most frightening of all, every lifeboat was missing, suggesting the crew had abandoned ship in a state of emergency. Yet the mystery deepened throughout the vessel. There were no signs of struggle, no evidence of violence, not a single drop of blood or the chaos one might expect from a pirate attack. In the galley pots still held half-prepared meals, and dishes looked as if they had been left behind in sudden haste, giving the impression that the crew had disappeared in an instant. This unnerving contrast, a massive ship intact in every way, yet utterly devoid of human life, planted a lasting terror that has haunted maritime history for more than a century. The scene aboard the Carroll A. Deering immediately evoked memories of the famous Mary Celeste, 1872, a ship also found deserted in the middle of the Atlantic with no explanation as to why. However, the Deering incident unfolded in a completely different context, the early 20th century, when maritime navigation had already advanced significantly with improved navigation systems, more accurate compasses, and radio communication. More importantly, it took place during America's Prohibition era, when smuggling, piracy, and criminal gangs thrived on the seas. This combination of technological progress and turbulent social conditions made the mystery of the Carroll A. Deering even more perplexing, distinctive, and haunting compared to that of the Mary Celeste. Immediately after the Carroll A. Deering was discovered, a flood of theories emerged in an attempt to explain the crew's baffling fate. One of the most common ideas was a possible mutiny. The crew may have turned against the captain and fled the vessel using the lifeboats. Yet this theory quickly faced contradictions, for if they had left, why did no one survive? And why was there no trace of them on sea or land? Another angle suggested the ship might have been attacked by pirates or rum-running gangs during Prohibition, when these waters were rife with criminal activity. However, the lack of blood signs of violence or stolen cargo rendered this explanation unconvincing. More practical researchers argued the crew may have encountered a sudden storm or serious maritime accident, forcing them to abandon ship. But the most perplexing question remains, why did the entire crew vanish without a single body or even fragments of lifeboats washing ashore? It is this illogical void that has kept the Carroll A. Deering mystery alive for over a century, with no definitive answer in sight. What makes this case truly terrifying is that Carroll A. Deering was found adrift with not a single person on board. The ship remained intact, the cargo untouched, no signs of looting or serious damage. Yet over 10 men had vanished as though they never existed. This stark contrast, a giant schooner towering over the waves but completely empty, cemented the incident as one of the most famous maritime mysteries in American history. Journalists quickly dubbed Carroll A. Deering the Mary Celeste of the 20th century. American newspapers covered it extensively, with some even linking it to the Bermuda Triangle, notorious for unexplained disappearances of ships and planes. While Cape Hatteras is not within the official Bermuda Triangle, the proximity and the eerie circumstances led the public to suspect supernatural forces. The US government launched an official investigation but reached no clear conclusion. The final report merely stated that the crew disappeared under unknown circumstances. This only deepened the mystery. From there, theories spread: further technical failure, mutiny, piracy, and even alien abduction or supernatural phenomena. Today, more than a century has passed, yet the mystery of the Carroll A. Deering remains unsolved. Not a single crew member was ever found, no lifeboat was ever recovered, and no evidence has ever been sufficient to explain what truly happened. The wreck itself was later battered by storms and dismantled, leaving behind only a handful of black and white photographs and dry investigation reports. All of this has turned the Carroll A. Deering into an enduring symbol of mysterious disappearances at sea. What makes Carroll A. Deering unique is precisely the absence of human life, the factor that turned it into one of America's most terrifying ghost ships. Ships can sink, be plundered, or destroyed. That is common in maritime history. But a modern vessel grounded intact cargo and equipment still present with only the crew missing. That is an enigma beyond explanation. Today, when people recall Carroll A. Deering, they picture a towering schooner, empty, cold, and drifting on the ocean with no one aboard. It has become a symbol of mystery, a reminder that even in the modern age, the sea still hides secrets beyond human control. Carol A. Deering was not just a maritime accident, but a modern legend, where the detail of being found adrift without a crew transformed it into one of the most famous ghost ships in American history. On a frigid day in 1775, as whalers navigated the unforgiving seas off Greenland, they spotted a lone vessel drifting silently through the ice. It was the Octavius, a ship that would soon etch its name into legend. When they boarded, they expected noise, movement, the bustle of life at sea. Instead, they were met with an eerie stillness, a silence so complete it seemed as if the very flow of time had stopped. What lay within would become one of the most haunting ghost ship stories ever told. In your opinion, which is more terrifying, a ship with no crew at all, like the Mary Celeste, or a ship like Octavius, where everyone is dead, but their bodies remain perfectly preserved? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In 1761, Octavius departed from an English port with an audacious ambition to become one of the first ships to conquer the Northwest Passage, the legendary route through the Arctic that would connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. It was the dream of many 18th century explorers, yet also a gamble with life itself, for the polar region at that time was little more than a blank space on the map. There were no detailed charts, no reliable climate records, only a shroud of mystery and peril. Towering ice floes could crush a vessel without warning. Freezing winds sliced through flesh, sudden blizzards struck without mercy, and death seemed to lurk at every horizon. Still, the burning desire to be pioneers drove the crew forward, and that same pride would ultimately deliver Octavius to its tragic fate, a grim reminder of the devastating price humans must pay when daring to challenge nature. When the whalers boarded Octavius in 1775, they encountered a scene so chilling it would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The entire crew was dead, yet not in chaos panic or the decay one might expect. Instead, it seemed as though they had simply paused their work and been frozen in time. Many bodies were found curled beneath blankets, their gaunt faces etched with the merciless marks of the cold. Others sat motionless, in chairs, heads resting on tables, their eyes closed as if in sleep, but a sleep from which they would never awaken. Most striking of all was the captain's cabin. There he sat upright at his desk, the ship's logbook open before him, a pen still clutched in his hand, as though death had struck in the very moment he was writing his final words. The relentless Arctic frost had preserved their forms for years, transforming the vessel into a colossal wooden coffin adrift upon the sea, carrying with it a company of frozen phantoms trapped in eternal silence. Unlike cases such as the Mary Celeste, where the crew vanished without a trace, Octavius horrified precisely because of the presence of frozen corpses. There was no disappearance, no abandonment, only a silent collective death preserved as mute evidence. Faces, still visible clothes, hardened by ice bodies locked in place, all gave the impression that time had stopped aboard this ship. What people saw were not just dead bodies, but the very final moments of life, moments frozen for years, a chilling sight beyond description. When the captain's logbook was examined, the last entry was found, dated 1762, just a year after Octavius had departed port. This chilling detail revealed a grim truth. The crew likely perished very early in their voyage, trapped when the ship was sealed within the Arctic ice. For the next 14 years, Octavius was no longer a vessel on a mission, but a drifting tomb of ice, wandering aimlessly across the sea. The bodies aboard did not decay or vanish. Instead, they lingered like silent phantoms, guarding the ship's frozen halls. For the whalers who stumbled upon it, stepping inside was like crossing into a cursed world where time itself had stopped and where the cold silence echoed endlessly in their minds. The deaths of the Octavius crew have fueled countless theories over the centuries. Some believe the ship was trapped in massive ice floes, leaving the crew powerless as the cold slowly drained their strength until life slipped away. Others suggest that after weeks of isolation, food and fresh water ran out and starvation struck them down, even before the cold delivered its final blow. Still, some argue it was a combination of many factors: hunger, freezing temperatures, illness, and despair that created this collective tragedy. Yet the most haunting detail is not the cause itself, but the way they all died mid-action, as though caught in their final living moments. That frozen image transformed Octavius into more than just a maritime disaster. It became a tableau of death, preserved in ice, a chilling testament to nature's merciless power. What makes the story of Octavius so haunting is the detail that the entire crew was dead, yet their bodies remained intact. In maritime history, there are few cases where the image of people has been preserved at the very moment of their final breath. Most ghost ship legends revolve around mysterious disappearances of crews like the Mary Celeste, or enigmas where no one survived to tell the tale. But Octavius was different. It did not merely pose the question, what happened? It forced people to confront a chilling tableau where the truth stood visible without explanation. Those frozen corpses draped the story in a spectral aura, transforming Octavius into a horrifying symbol etched forever in maritime memory. For centuries, the story of Octavius has sparked fierce debate among scholars and historians. No official records confirm the ship's existence, leading many to believe it was merely a maritime legend woven from the fears and imaginations of sailors long ago. Yet the enduring power of the tale does not rest on historical evidence, but on the strength of its imagery. A vessel imprisoned in ice, its crew long dead but perfectly preserved, drifting aimlessly like a chilling warning. Whether fact or fable, Octavius continues to instill in people a haunting awareness of human fragility against the merciless Arctic. It reminds us that in such a realm, one may not only vanish, but also remain forever entombed in a frozen death. Thus, Octavius entered history as both a warning and a haunting tale. It testifies to mankind's relentless urge to explore, but also reminds us there are places nature has not yet permitted us to reach. The image of the captain seated before his logbook, pen in hand, became an emblem of tragic destiny. Man may record his journey, yet sometimes never complete it. That logbook, like the ship itself, became the relic of a tragedy frozen in time. Today, when people recall Octavius, they do not only think of a ghost ship, they think of a mirror, reflecting mankind's primal fear of being trapped, abandoned, and frozen forever in a cold death. In collective memory, Octavius has become one of the most terrifying maritime symbols, embodying humanity's helplessness before the Arctic's brutal force. For that reason, its story endures not as a mere event, but as a haunting legend that will be told for all time. In maritime history, there have been many stories of ships abandoned and drifting across the oceans with no survivors on board. But few cases have left such haunting questions as the story of the Joyita in 1955 in the South Pacific. Nicknamed the Mary Celeste of the Pacific, Joyita not only shocked the maritime world, but also became a symbol of mysteries left unsolved. And the most chilling detail of all, not a single body was ever found. What do you think really happened to the 25 people aboard the Joyita? Were they victims of panic piracy or something far stranger? Share your thoughts in the comments below. On October 3, 1955, the vessel Joyita, about 21 meters long, once serving during World War II and later converted into a combined cargo and passenger ship, departed from Samoa, bound for the Tokelau Islands. The voyage was expected to last only about 48 hours, and on board were a total of 25 people, including crew and passengers. They carried various goods, medical supplies, and provisions intended to support isolated communities scattered across the ocean. It was supposed to be a routine journey, nothing unusual, and no one could have imagined it would turn into one of the greatest maritime mysteries in history. Yet Joyita never arrived. After weeks of complete silence, the vessel was finally discovered on November 10, 1955, more than a month after departure. By then, Joyita was drifting aimlessly across the South Pacific, eerily quiet like a ghost ship, with not a single person left on deck. All 25 souls had vanished, leaving behind a chilling void that remains unexplained to this day. When the search and rescue teams finally reached the Joyita, the sight before them sent chills down their spines. The deck was smeared with thick black oil stains, evidence that the engines had suffered serious trouble. Inside the cabins, many windows were shattered and wires hung in tangled clusters as if someone had hastily dismantled them. Most striking of all, the radio transmitter, the lifeline for communication across the ocean, had been removed in a puzzling manner, leaving Joyita completely cut off during its voyage. Yet strangely enough, the hull remained afloat and stable, thanks to its special anti-sinking design, meaning the vessel itself was never in imminent danger of being abandoned. What chilled investigators even more was that all personal belongings, documents, and most disturbingly, every single lifeboat were gone. The signs of a rushed evacuation were unmistakable, but no one knew what had happened afterward. And above all, the most haunting detail was this: not a single body was ever found. 25 people had vanished completely, as if swallowed whole by the sea, leaving behind not even the faintest trace for future generations to follow. What makes the Joyita incident one of the most haunting maritime mysteries is the detail that not a single body was ever found. In most sea tragedies, whether the ship sinks or is abandoned, rescue teams usually recover at least a few bodies or traces, such as life jackets, fragments of lifeboats, or even just personal items drifting in the water. But with Joyita, 25 people seem to have vanished completely into the vast ocean. No bodies, no bones, not even the slightest sign proving whether they were dead or alive. This absolute disappearance elevated the case into a chilling legend, giving rise to countless theories, from scientific explanations such as panic and abandonment to darker speculations involving piracy, smuggling, or even supernatural forces beyond human understanding. After Joyita was discovered, abandoned theories began to pour in, each attempting to explain how all 25 people could vanish completely without leaving a single trace. The first and most reasonable theory suggested that the crew had fallen into a state of panic. When the engines failed and water started leaking into the compartments, they may have believed the ship was about to sink and hurriedly abandoned Joyita in the lifeboats. However, this argument was quickly challenged, because if that were the case, search teams should have at least found some bodies, fragments of lifeboats, or drifting belongings. In reality, nothing was ever found, making this scenario far less convincing. A second theory pointed to the possibility of pirates or smugglers attacking the vessel. They might have killed or kidnapped everyone on board. Yet the puzzling question remained: why didn't the attackers sink Joyita to erase the evidence? And why were there no signs of slaughter, no blood, no clear destruction? Another theory suggested that internal conflict between the captain and crew escalated into violence with disastrous consequences. But even this could not explain the central mystery: why was not a single body ever found? In the end, when logical explanations proved insufficient, many turned to supernatural theories. Some believed Joyita may have strayed into a kind of Pacific Triangle, or that an invisible force had taken the people away. Though lacking scientific basis, such theories held strong appeal as they stirred our deepest fear that sometimes humans can disappear completely before a power beyond our understanding. It is precisely the variety yet incompleteness of these theories that has allowed the story of Joyita to live on as one of the sea's most enduring unsolved mysteries. Compared to the case of the Mary Celeste in 1872, many often refer to Joyita as the Mary Celeste of the Pacific. However, the truth is far more chilling. On the Mary Celeste, there were still indirect clues suggesting the crew had abandoned ship tools, records, and belongings left behind. But on Joyita, what haunts people most is the absolute disappearance of 25 individuals. No traces, no clues, not a single body. This difference is what makes Joyita an even darker and more terrifying tale, a mystery far beyond anything the Mary Celeste ever suggested. What makes the Joyita incident so chilling and difficult to explain is the complete absence of bodies. In the vastness of the ocean, it is not unusual for one or two individuals to be lost, but for an entire group of 25 people to vanish at once without leaving the slightest trace is almost impossible to believe. No clues, no bones, no physical evidence to help reconstruct the truth. This absolute disappearance not only sparks curiosity, but also plants a deep fear that the sea can swallow an entire group of people without offering any explanation at all. Today, the story of Joyita is still retold in books, documentaries, and mystery archives. The ship became a symbol, not because of its design or its wartime service, but because of the strange fate of her crew. No bodies, no answers, only a chilling silence left behind. 1955 is long past, witnesses have passed away, and official records are insufficient to reconstruct the truth. For that reason, Joyita will forever remain on the list of the world's most famous ghost ships, where the silence of the ocean is the only answer left behind.